Good morning once again and welcome to another, I was going to say crazy village walk, but it's a nice day today, so why not? You've got to get out on days in February when the sky is blue and the sun is shining. So where are we today? We are at Tickencote near Stamford. Tickencote is definitely 100% Anglo-Saxon. The name Tickencote stands for, I think it's made up of two Saxon words, ticken, which is goats, and cote, which is the sort of herding place, a collection, a gathering, call it what you like. It's a sort of gathering place for goats, and that's where the name came from Anglo-Saxon days. It was in the Domesday Book, etc., etc. I think, like most areas, really, you can go back. I think this one goes back 6,000 or 7,000 years to the Mesolithic era. They found settlements around Tickencote, or around the Tickencote area, where man settled, at least for a period of time. They think the reason being is because there's a lot of springs here between the limestone rock and the clay that's in this area. Where the two meet, you get freshwater springs, and if you get freshwater springs, you tend to get settlements. So there's people been here for a long, long time. In terms of an organised village, hamlet, call it what you like, definitely Anglo-Saxon without a doubt. Why have I come here? Well, I've kind of got two weaknesses in life, probably three. I like mince pies and I like Eccles cakes, that's two of them. The third one is old watermills. I love old watermills, and a good friend of mine said, did you know there's an old watermill in Tickencote? Answer was no, so I had to come out here to see that. And there's also a great church here, and when I say great church, I mean different gravy. When it comes to churches, completely different gravy, one of the finest churches in the country. So we'll be grabbing that towards the end of the walk. There's a few other things dotted around of interest. I'll try and make sense of what I've managed to revise on this one and see what it looks like. I've never been here before, so I will do my best. But yeah, Tickencote, here we come. I noticed when I walked across this field a few minutes ago, it's full of bumps and lumps. In fact, we're walking up what I would suggest is an old medieval trackway. Now, I'm sticking my neck out here because I've not revised this, I've not read this. I'm making this up as I go, but this piece of ground is most definitely old. You can see in the far distance there are humps and lumps and God knows what. Now, I do know that Tickencote, going back to the 1300s, was bigger than it is now, and it had quite a lot of settlements around the fringes, of which I would guess this is one of those. And 50%, 60% I think it was, of the village died out during the bubonic plague, the Black Death, which I ought to remember the dates of, and I don't. I think it was about 1360, something like that. But yeah, I'm putting two and two together here, but I suspect one of the areas where there were settlements was here. I mean, there's definitely something going on here. These are not natural formations in the ground. This was definitely part of the old village, which is quite interesting and unexpected. Across the field there, right on the very edge of Tickencote, but probably given away by little more than that centrepiece there with the big window, was the old village school. Now, I can't find when it started. I think it was about 1870s. I can find a record going back to 1873. I can't find anything before then. That would have been about the right time, I suspect, for the formation of a village school. And it closed a long time ago. It closed in 1922, and it was never a big school. I think it had a capacity for about 28, if I remember. And I think they averaged about 19, 20 pupils here, and they just decided, even that far back, you know, over 100 years ago, that it just was not financially viable to keep it going. And I think they sort of merged with the school at Great Casterton, which is just down the road, and the school died away. But the village school building is still there. We might get a better view around the front of it. But that's it, yeah, that's the village school. Yeah, some fantastic formations in the ground here. Most definitely there was a building here of some sort. You know, it's all little enclosures, and you can imagine there was a building here and then a wall and a building on the other side. I'm going to have to do some more research on this, but it looks good. Looks good. Don't know what that is over there. There was most definitely something in this field a very long time ago. That's a nice building. That's shows on my map as a vicarage. It's not a listed building, so I can't tell you too much about dates. My guess is it's probably not that old, because the fact it's not listed probably means it dates after 1845, when they sort of got a little bit more picky about what was and wasn't listed. So I would guess it probably mid 1800s. But yeah, marked as a vicarage on all of my maps really, through the 1800s into the 1900s. Let's try and find our way into the village. That's the school building from the other side. A bit more obviously a school building from this side. Flower Pot Cottage coming up. Used to be the Flower Pot Inn, closed late 1800s. If you're a John Clare fan, you'll know about this, because John Clare used to drink here. He used to come over here, and he met his wife-to-be. I think her name was Patty, and she was born in Tickencote, and this was the Flower Pot Inn. And so it's been closed for a very long time. These two cottages are both 1700s. Loosecote Cottage is the first one, named after the battle that took place in the War of the Roses nearby. And the second one is the only thatched cottage in the village. I mean, they all used to be thatched, but this is the only one left, Dawson's Cottage, mid-1700s. The big manor house at Tickencote was Tickencote Hall. You won't be surprised to hear. Now, Tickencote Hall was quite a mighty building. I put a couple of pictures up. As you can see, it's a classical sort of stately home. I think that one dates back to, or that version, 1709 to about 1949, I think it was. And then it was lost, it was levelled. But Tickencote Hall still exists today, because they converted one of the stable blocks into what is today's Tickencote Hall. It's very difficult to see, so I'm making my way around the back of the village now, see if I can get some pictures. I will get some. I've just got to work out how to do that. But yeah, the Wingfield family, been resident there for 400 years. I'm not quite sure they're there now. They were until quite recently, but they were the big name, they were the big family in Tickencote, not just because they were like the lords of the manor and the most important family here, but they pretty much rebuilt the church, or were responsible for the rebuild of the church, which we'll see later on. So a very significant name in these parts. So at the moment I'm going to try and get some shots of the hall without upsetting the resident goats that look quite big. Actually they're sheep, but you know what I mean. There it is, that is today's Tickencote Hall. Used to be the stable block, but very elegantly converted now into what I think justifies the tag of being a manor house. It actually dates back a long way, because as I say, the hall I showed you in that picture a few seconds ago, it was built in 1709, but there was a hall here before that that went back a lot further. There's been sort of a manor house of sorts here for very many hundreds of years. And yeah, this building here was the oldest part of the 1709 build, in so much as parts of this do date back to the previous version, although some say it's just the foundations of it, so I'm not sure whether there's anything built into it or not, but it was always considered to be the oldest part of the 1709 build, so it's probably quite appropriate that it's the one that still survives today. Just moved around the side a little bit now. I think I'm right in saying where this dip in the ground is in front of us is where the big building was, where the hall was. I could be wrong, but it looks about right. It was certainly about in this area, just the other side of this fence. The building itself, although it was levelled in 1949, it was going downhill. It wasn't in a good state in the early 1900s. It needed a lot of money spent on it. Like a lot of state homes during the war years, it was commandeered for the war effort. It was a Canadian army of some sort that were here, Canadian troops anyway, used it as a base and as a training ground. And as is always the case with that storyline, post-war it was in a bigger mess than it was before the war. You know, it got damaged, got wrecked, and the Wingfield family decided, well, we're not going to spend money on putting that back to what it was. It would have been a phenomenal cost. Nobody really wanted to live here at that point in time. It was too big, and so they actually sold it for next to nothing. I read in a newspaper report in the archives, they sold it for next to nothing to a builder who simply wanted the stone to be used elsewhere, and that was that was the sole reason it was levelled, and the fact that nobody wanted it. So a bit sad really. But yeah, they rectified, they brought it back by converting that stable block there, and even the buildings to the right. I think, if I remember rightly, that smaller building in the centre there behind the van, it used to be the building where they did all the laundry, and that's obviously been put back into current day use. I mentioned earlier about the Wingfield family and their influence on the village and the rebuilding of the church, which we'll see in a bit. John Wingfield also built the watermill here. I think it was 1731, something like that, and it's quite a complex construction, not so much the building, but how he actually got the water there to power the water wheel. Although it sits right next to a river, the water was actually coming from around the back of the mill that powered the water wheel, and the way he did it was to build what's known as a mill dam, which is a pool of water from which he took water to drive the wheel. But you've got to feed water into that mill dam, and obviously he was doing that, and he built a 2-mile long stream called a mill race that ran from the river Gwash, which runs next to the mill. It's a 2-mile feed that went across the fields to feed that water dam, from which then he took water to drive his wheel around. Now if you look at this map, it struck me as rather strange when I looked at it, because you can see the mill race coming along the top from the left, and you can see the mill dam, the mill pool, call it what you wish, further down on the right. And the question mark was, how on earth did the water in the mill race get into the water dam, because it doesn't seem to be connected. And even if you go back to maps in the 1800s, it wasn't connected either, so I can only assume it must have gone underground. So I was quite interested today, see if I could find out how they did it. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that, but I have just bumped into what I think is the end of the mill race. So I've got so far. I'm going to see if I can work out the answer to this puzzle. Well, that's definitely the mill race, as was. Man-made. And it's disappearing in that direction. See if we can follow it. Listen up. I hear water falling somewhere, which is, I think, going to be the answer to my puzzle. That looks like it in the corner there. See if I can get a better view. Well, that's certainly one exit point for the mill race. Whether that's the one that feeds the mill pond, I can't see it coming out the other side, so it must be going down somewhere. I'm pleased I found that. That's answered that puzzle. The water went underground somehow across to the mill dam. The reason they dam the water up like that instead of just taking the stream and driving the water wheel from the stream is that, you know, millers wanted a constant flow of water. They needed to be able to rely on a constant, even paced flow of water to drive the wheel. They couldn't really deal with the wheel slowing down and speeding up depending on how much water was on the stream. So by damming it up like that, then he could just control the flow via some sluice gates to the wheel and always have a sort of static supply which was constantly being topped up, so he could sort of control the pace of driving the water wheel around, and that's why he did it. But it's a hell of a construction for quite a small mill, to build a 2-mile mill race from the river all the way across the fields just to bring it in around the back. But we will be seeing the mill very shortly, I hope. I thought it looked a bit dodgy. He's down there. Just coming down now to where the dammed up water that was used to drive the mill still lurks. I can't really see where the water enters it, but it must do. I'm pretty sure that's it. We must be around the back of the mill here. And that's where it would all be pulled up, ready to be used by the miller. Can't really get a good view of it, but that is the back of the mill to the left there, where the water would have escaped down to drive the water wheel. Can't get a clean view of it, unfortunately. It's a slightly better view. See quite a few old water pumps, 1800s dated, on my travels. This is a good one because it's complete with a handle. Very nice. Tempted to push the handle down, see if it still works, but I won't. No, my luck, I'll break it. That's good to see. Two old cottages here, cornerstones on the right, which is a 1700s build. The one to the left, which I think is Horseshoe Cottage, is older. That's a 1600s. They look almost like they're the same building, but they're not, as you can see from the roof line. The one on the right must have been bolted onto the one on the left about 100 years later. This wall on the right here is actually Grade 2 listed. It's an 1800s wall, but it's great to list. It's always strange, given some buildings we see are not, but this wall is. The building in the distance is Home Farmhouse, 1700s 3-storey farmhouse, very grand. Had a cottage to its left, but that's been merged with it now, so it's a very desirable res and a big one too. Unusual place to have a letterbox. I bet that's going to be an old one. Indeed it is, the Victoria. Don't get many of those. Queen Victoria letterbox is still in use. VR, Queen Victoria. It's going to go back into the 1800s. Right, should be coming down to the mill building. We can't go too far down this road. There it is. Tickencote Mill. We're coming up to the back now of Tickencote Hall that we saw across the fields. You can't really see anything this side. The hall's a big one at the back. Fantastic mill building. I do love old water mills. The wooden bit at the top is what they call a locum, and customers bringing grain would park their horse-drawn carts right underneath it, and they would use a pulley using that big wheel on the wall to pull it. I don't know how that works, but they would pull it up basically to the locum, which is the top of the mill, where it would work its way down, turn into flour. It was just the way they used, the thing they used on these mills to pull grain up to be processed, but good to see. I think when we were looking across the field and I said the mill building was to the left because this one looked too pretty, actually the one with all the windows was the mill, and it still looks pretty. Very nice. Nice water wheel down there. Millstone, sorry, water wheel. I wish. 2 millstones with an arch between them. Right, the church. Get a load of this. Tickencote Church. Amazing architecture. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, just sort of soak this up. It's pretty incredible. I can't shoot it too well because I've got a tree in the way. Right, have a read of that. Basically in the early 1700s, Eliza Wingfield, part of the Wingfield family obviously, stumped up the money to have what was described as a dilapidated church restored, but highly unusually, and good to report, she didn't rebuild it in a style contemporary with the age. What she wanted to do was rebuild it as it was originally. So basically put it back together in a more robust form, but without taking away what was here previously. And what was here previously was a Norman church. It went right back to the 1100s, maybe early 1200s. And so on the face of it, this is one of the best, if not the best, Norman churches in the country. But with the caveat that it's kind of not genuine, because it was rebuilt with Eliza's fundings. Otherwise it wouldn't be here today, for sure. But she rebuilt it, but in the form that it was in before. And that's a story that continues inside, which I hope we'll be able to get into shortly. But the architecture outside is stunning. It is classically Norman. And still very much worth seeing. I put up this is an old illustration from the early 1700s, before it was restored. And you'll see the actual back end of the chancel was pretty much as it is. Wasn't exactly as it is, but the decorations, the architecture was pretty much as it is today, so it's pretty much well restored. There's just a few artistic pieces of artistic license, like the centre window there has moved. You know, you can pick fault with it, but it's pretty much the same sort of visual setup that existed before the rebuild. However, the bits down the side were kind of completely redone. It didn't look like this down the side. It's a bit of a complex mix, really. The pointed arches there are definitely not of a Roman style. Sorry, Norman style, not Roman style. The Norman style is to its left, really, where you have the rounded arches at the top, not the pointed ones. So you've got a mixture there of different styles, but why not? The windows above, classic Norman. Why on earth they were filled in with windows in the corners? It's like they put an outer shell down and then kind of, it didn't really fit perfectly with where the windows were. A bit strange, but still stunning arches. I didn't mention earlier that Eliza was 85 years old when she undertook this project, and she died sadly when she was 87, so she would have seen it, but didn't live for too long afterwards. The tower was just not here when she did her rebuild. I mean, this was brand new, as it were, but again made to look very, very Norman, with that big arch and the arched windows and the pillars. The actual building was done by a local Stamford builder under the guidance of an architect from London, Savile Row in London, no less. A couple of mighty chest tombs. Rebecca, the wife of Thomas Jelly, departed this life February 1842, aged 31. That's no age, is it really? Sacred to the memory of William Oswin, who died December the 9th, 1865, aged 68. That is a mighty big chest tomb. It's a nice horizontal grave slab there. Don't usually get much decorations on these apart from a cross. This one seems to have some distinct mouldings on it, which probably says something about who he was, or she was. There's a row of Wingfield family stones here. Looks like Sarah Wingfield, died 1866. I can't read that one. At the back, Charles William Wingfield, Major General, 1872, aged 72. Just around the other side of the chancel building. Didn't expect to find one of those on the church. Ordnance Survey benchmark. Like the one we saw in Tansor on the railway bridge. They crop up everywhere. Okay, we're inside. It's a bit dark. But that archway is very original. Dates back to the early to mid 1100s. Classic Norman archway, thought to be the best of its kind anywhere in the country. It is spectacular, really is. Thought by some that once it actually was the entrance to the church at one end of it, when it was in its very early days, in its very early Norman days, it was thought that might actually have been one end of the church and was actually the doorway. Would have been some incredibly big doors on it, but there is some evidence to suggest that the outer edges of the arch were exposed to the outside at some point. So it would have been a very narrow, single room, single cell church in the early Norman times. Obviously it's now come indoors. Up above is the crest of the Wingfield family on the left, and I think it's the Johnson family on the right. The two families married into one another at some point. That arch is something special. We're actually standing in the nave, which is relatively newly built. It's a part of the 1700s build. It doesn't represent how it was before. But everything beyond that arch, although it was cleaned up and rebuilt as in put back together again, it is all original, completely original. One, two, three, four, five, six different rigs, all completely different in the way they've been carved out 900 years ago. The other very spectacular element of this church are these spider-like arms that go up to the sort of centre boss. It's very rare apparently for Norman architecture to have something like this. And again, it's unique. It's thought to be certainly the best of its kind anywhere in the country, and possibly the only one of its kind. Unique Norman architecture. These stunning Norman windows, deep, rounded at the top. Everything you'd want from a Norman window. And lovely glass as well. The font is Norman as well. The top is Norman, should I say. The base is not. The base was added. It's a lovely carving. Again, that's dating back 800 to 900 years and still being used today. The only thing that's not original about it, apart from its base, is it's not where it would have originally been. It's been moved here. It would have been over there. Down there, I would imagine. Because I always used to put the fonts in front of the door, and that at the time was the door. Something to do with your entry into the faith. First thing you come into when you come through the church is the font. The bell's very old, it's cracked and can't be used, but I think it dates back to the church before it was restyled, or not restyled, but tidied up in the early 1700s. There's an image somewhere, or a photo somewhere, should I say. I put it up. It's got like a bell cot on the top of the original church. And I'm pretty sure this is one of the bells that were in there. The church is only rarely used now. I think I heard somewhere that it has 6 services a year. It used to be 12, it's down to 6 now. It's under the, it's still a parish church, but it's under the protection of the Church Conservation Trust people now, who thankfully stepped in when it really got into difficulties in terms of, you know, there's a lot of upkeep for church of this quality in terms of looking after it. They stepped in to fund it and keep it open and keep it available to the public. You can come here, I think it's open 7 days a week. You can come here and you can walk in and walk around. If you've never been here, it's a fantastic place to come and see. I mean, the village is lovely, but to come and see this church is very, very special. And so you can come 7 days a week, come for a summer stroll around the village, make sure you pop into the church. It's a very special place. I always love my ghost doorways and archways, and I wonder what that is. My guess is that there was a bigger door that ran down to ground level there. I don't know. Can't really explain that one. Some interesting characters up on these walls. The names of some of the earliest rectors at the church, going back to 1233. What a fantastic place. As I thought it would be, it really is an impressive church. And that's an understatement. It's a unique church. You will not see better than this anywhere in the UK. This Norman architecture in this church is unique and totally unequalled wherever you go. Even if it's a cathedral, you won't match these fantastic arches behind me. And a nice village too. So it's a nice way to end the video. I hope you've enjoyed some of it. Thank you very much, as ever, for keeping me company. Anything that I've got wrong, do drop me a line, or even if I've got it right, drop me a line underneath the video, either on YouTube or on Peterborough Images. And I appreciate your support once again. If you haven't subscribed, it really will help me if you can click that little red button in the corner. I could do so much more if I could just get a few more subscribers. So yeah, appreciate your support, and I will see you next time out.